Hello, and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong. I'm Hovig Manusharyan. Today's episode is a collaborative effort with 168 hours in an effort to increase the amount of English language content in the midst of the humanitarian crisis that is ongoing in Artsakh right now. But before we begin, a standard request to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter. All of our links are on our Linktree page, available in the description of this episode. So click on that and check us out on all of the various social media platforms that you're on. If you like our shows, please share with your friends and follow us everywhere you're used to getting your news. It means a lot to us. Thanks, and on with the show. And in this episode, we continue our coverage of the blockade of Artsakh, which has entered its sixth day. This episode was recorded on Saturday, December 17, 2022.
Our guest today is Arthur Khachikyan, PhD, who is an international relations expert from Stanford University specializing in intervention, and he currently teaches at the Russian Armenian University in Yerevan. Hello and welcome, Arthur.
Glad to be here.
Let me give you a little background and then we'll dive into the questions. So on Monday, December 12th, a group of people in civilian clothes blocked the Shushi-Karintak segment of the Lachin corridor. And although this is clearly sort of instigated by the Azerbaijani government, the official pretense was concerns about ecology and the use of mines in Artsakh or Nagorno-Karabakh. And the specific mine in question is the Kashan gold mine, which employs 1,800 people and is one of the major taxpayers in Artsakh. As a result, more than 120,000 people now are in a total blockade, because that was the only lifeline from Artsakh to and from Stepanakert. Even gas service was stopped for 2-3 days, but it has been restored. And thousands of Artsakhi's who were visiting Armenia are now stranded here, among them children. Food, medicine, fuel are all under rations, and the international response, as we know, has been limited to the realm of announcements. The Russian peacekeepers, while under constant harassment by the Azerbaijanis, so far are maintaining their cool, but they are also seem to be shying away from the use of force, and so far, have not been able to clear the blockade. Artsakh officials, even stranded here in Yerevan, are conducting a sit-in in various different embassies and various different missions, and the situation seems to be very sort of concerning. My question, Arthur, to begin with, is we've discussed Azerbaijan's long-term strategy, which seems to be focused both on depopulating Artsakh, discouraging the people from living there, at the same time maybe to even bring in Azerbaijanis to influence future demographics to its sort of benefit. And but the one question that sort of still remains is, why now? Why go to this escalation now? And what instigated Azerbaijan to block the Lachin corridor this week specifically?
Thank you. You touched upon a few very important points, so if I forget any of them, please remind me. The one issue you mentioned was the possibility of the Russian peacekeepers using force. We need to be very clear about this. If Russia uses force against Azerbaijanis, the peacekeeping contingent will effectively become a party to the conflict. Once Russia becomes a party to the conflict, it's no longer a peacekeeper, and it will be asked to leave. On top of it all, in the situation that we find ourselves, which is a direct result of the war in Ukraine, Russia cannot and doesn't want to confront Turkey and Azerbaijan. It cannot do it because Turkey is its essential ally. Thanks to this war in Ukraine, this is the situation we have. We said in February that Turkey and Azerbaijan are going to take full advantage of this situation, and they did. They're trying to solve all of their problems now from the position of force, because they see that Russia has been weakened and Armenia cannot do anything at all. And if I'm not mistaken, a few days ago, one of their dignitaries said that this is the convenient moment to take everything that we can. Mm-hmm. So it all matches up. It makes perfect sense. Their long-term goal, of course, is to slowly reconquer this region, change the demographic situation, partly deport the population, and partly just make sure that they become a minority. And I think this is the first step. Of course, this is just a pretext. These are not environmentalists. It's a ridiculous pretext that they're creating. Right. But this is just the first step. The next step we'll see is they will try to gradually take control of Mardakert, Stepanakert, and other towns and villages, And then when they're done with this particular enclave, their next step would be the corridor through southern Armenia, and then the same method will be used to cut it off. So we have a lot of things coming.
So on that note, in addition to the so-called environmentalists, video clips shared by Azerbaijani media also showed police presence there, as well as presence of special forces directly on the corridor. And the demands of these so-called environmentalists have now been sort of increased, including sort of they now demand the presence of Azerbaijani state bodies, customs, Ministry of State Protection, to be stationed in conjunction with the Russian peacekeepers. Also, they want the Azerbaijani border guards to be stationed on the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan on the Lachin corridor itself. None of these demands stem from the November 9-10 agreement, but here we are. And yesterday we even heard calls from members of their Milli Meclis, their parliament, that Russian peacekeepers must leave. Do you foresee such a development that any of these demands are met? What can we expect given the situation we're in right now?
This makes perfect sense. They know that they can speak from the position of power, position of force. Like I said, they see that Russia cannot confront them now militarily, so they're going to try to do everything they can to meet their demands. I think this is just the beginning. They're going to try to slowly restore their control, city by city, village by village. The Russian peacekeepers are still resisting them at this point. It's difficult to say if it's going to last for a long time. And as you can see, the international community limited itself to just a few declarations. And as we know, declarations don't make any difference. If I'm mistaken, please correct me, but I don't think that any real steps were taken by Europe or by the United States or by the other countries that pretend to represent the international community. I don't think anything has been done really to deter Turkey and Azerbaijan. No sanctions, no military assistance to Armenia, nothing. They're just words. They will express concern, they're concerned, they will call on the parties to restore peace. It's great. They did it, it's wonderful, but it really doesn't change much. As for these environmentalists, it's just an avant-garde for the Azeri and Turkish forces. They're just an avant-garde. It's clear.
I mean, it's a clever way, right, to
it's a cover.
Essentially,
it's a front.
They wouldn't sort of march in there with the military, but they're civilians or so-called civilians. In fact, there are reports that some of these are directly sort of employed by the government anyway. They were able to match the Facebook profiles. Do you also believe there's an element here to try to influence Armenia? Specifically, we know that Armenian authorities have said basically Artsakh is now the problem of the Russian peacekeepers, but we will not budge on the so-called Zangezur corridor issue. Do you believe by doing this, Azerbaijan is basically blackmailing Armenia into ceding sort of a corridor of sorts, basically based on whatever their whims and conditions are?
Well, they're certainly applying pressure. They are trying to use their force to get whatever they want. If they get the enclave, if they get Karabakh, the next step is going to be the corridor. They're not budging on this. They're saying that this is what we want and we will have it. And then the same methods will be used in that corridor. First, it'll just be a corridor. Then they will have truck drivers or environmentalists or astronomers or whoever move in there, and behind them you will have the Turkish army and the Azeri army, and that will be the day when Armenia loses Sunik. The southern region will be gone. We'll have no contact with Kapan, Goris, Megri, and all the other towns in the south. The same methods will be used there. Now, this whole strategy of making Karabakh Russia's responsibility, Russia responded very clearly to that. They said that if Armenia wants to recognize it as part of Azerbaijan, we are not going to fight your battles for you. They said it very clearly. They see this as a Western attempt to provoke Russia into another war on its southern borders. They see this as a potential second front. They said it very, very clearly. They're not going to do that, especially knowing that they see this regime as clearly anti-Russian and pro-Western. They see this as a provocation, and they're not going to start a war for us in our place.
But so at the same time, let's look at, and there's been criticism, ironically, both from Armenian and Azerbaijani sides against the Russian peacekeepers. And some analysts believe basically the goal is to put pressure on the Russian peacekeepers and to make the costs of doing their job there so high that they'll be forced to leave. Others, there is also another angle that there is an attempt, as you say, that the Russians believe, which is to open another front in their war. But I just want to cite an Azerbaijani pollster, a government pollster, government-affiliated pollster, which published the results of a poll indicating that more than 80% of Azerbaijanis would like the Russian peacekeepers to leave. And an Armenian poll recently also published, it was Gallup International, mentioned that more than 59% of the responders view Russia's role in the conflict as largely negative. But given the facts that we have, given what we have, and trying to be objective, how would you evaluate the activity of the Russian peacekeepers? What could they do that they haven't done? And for instance, the fact that they were able to sort of storm in there and gain such a high number of people there that maybe they could have sort of acted earlier. I'm not sure, but do you think that the Russian peacekeepers are doing their job as much as they are allowed?
Well, let's stay away from political agendas. I know there are a lot of people here who are basically being paid to say certain things and to carry on with their propaganda, either pro-Western or pro-Russian. Let's think logically. The term peacekeeper, what does that mean? Normally, traditional peacekeeping, it has to be organized according to Article 6 of the UN Charter, if I'm not mistaken, and there are some basic principles. These forces are there to keep peace. How do you keep peace? By remaining neutral. You're there only by mutual consent. Both parties have to consent to your presence. You have to be neutral, and you have to have no vested interest in this conflict. So you're basically a neutral observer, but you cannot force either of the parties to maintain peace if they don't want to. Azerbaijan clearly doesn't want to have peace. Their vision of peace is Armenians leaving. That's what they want. So these are not really classic UN peacekeeping forces. If there were, they would not be able to stop Azerbaijan. And no other country, correct me if I'm wrong, is willing to send its forces there to stop the Turkish Azeri aggression. So these are quasi-peacekeepers. And the advantage of that kind of an arrangement is that we have Russia behind them, and Russia still has some influence, some weakening influence, but there's still some influence on Armenia and Azerbaijan that allows both parties to have this arrangement. Azerbaijan, as you mentioned, the Azeri side is now advocating their withdrawal. They want them to withdraw so that they can get rid of the Armenians who live there. So if there were if Russia continues to weaken, if the Russian influence continues to weaken, they may, in fact, one day decide that they can no longer withstand this pressure and leave. But there is no other country or organization that's willing to send its forces there, nor does Azerbaijan want to accept them. They said that we will not accept any international mediation, and they will not do anything because they cannot stop them. That's the problem. So when we blame Russia for doing nothing, well, if Russia openly confronts the Azeri forces or citizens, it becomes party to the conflict. So it can no longer be a peacekeeper. Then we have a Russian military intervention in Azerbaijan, if we stick to the international terms, right? So there will be direct intervention in Azerbaijan. Russia becomes party to the conflict, and there's a war then.
But so that aside, the military aspect aside, can you talk a little bit more about other factors that may be tying Russia's hands in terms of exerting more pressure on Azerbaijan?
Well, Russia is very, very dependent now on Turkey and Azerbaijan. They have become a major outlet for Russian gas and oil flowing to the west because of this war in NATO. And like I said, Turkey is very, very smart. They took full advantage of the war, as they usually do. So Turkey has now become a major Russian ally in a world where everyone else is against Russians. They cannot afford to lose Turkey. Turkey is their transport hub, is soon to become their hub for selling its natural gas to Europe. Financial hub, many Russians live there. They travel through Turkey to go anywhere they want to be. It's like the last gate that Russia has that's open to the world. They cannot afford any kind of confrontation with Turkey. Turkey knows that, and that's why it's taking advantage of the situation. We're the ones who should have seen this coming. We should have seen this coming years ago. This rapprochement between Russia and Turkey has been taking place for over 10 years, 15 years. We should have seen this coming, and we should have taken measures either to strengthen our army, not either, both doing that, strengthening our army and also correcting our diplomatic course and maybe making some concessions that would not have been as tragic as this situation, and withdrawing from the situation, seeing that there is this rapprochement. Anytime Turkey and Russia become friends, it's a mortal danger for us. We know this. We should have seen this coming.
So those are the global factors that, as you mentioned. How about what Armenia could have done? Like, could Armenia have done anything recently? For instance, Yerevan vetoed the CSTO summit declarations just last month or this month. Do you think that Armenia's behavior vis-a-vis Russia and vis-a-vis CSTO may have influenced Russia's decision here to sort of, not be as forceful or not, what could have we done differently?
Well, like I said, objectively, they cannot confront Turkey, and they cannot, and they don't want to, and they see this as a provocation. Now, subjectively, yes, we've done everything we could have done to ruin our relationship with Russia and to make sure that Russia and Turkey and Azerbaijan become buddies. Because when we kind of withdrew from our relationship with Russia, it pushed Moscow towards Ankara and Baku. It's very simple. I'm not going to go through a whole list of things we've done wrong, from arresting the chairman of the CSTO to insulting Putin to attacking Russian businesses here, closing Russian TV channels. We've done everything we could have done. We have people who pose as analysts, who speak on our national networks. They present themselves as analysts. In fact, the only agenda they have is just to make up more and more stories about the evil Russian hand, and without any evidence, without presenting any evidence. So we have done everything we could have. Regarding this meeting in Armenia, of course, it would have been nice if Russia condemned, the Azeri presence on our territory. But again, they cannot do that. We have done everything we could have done to offend Russia and to also condemn every single country that's part of the CSTO, Belarus, Russia, and all the others, because we declared ourselves a democracy. You see, we were supposed to be this mothership of democracy. So we kind of put the money on the Western side, on the Western horse. We thought the West would come and help us because we became a velvet democracy. That did not happen. Mm-hmm. They didn't do that during the war, and they're not doing it now. But instead, at the same time, we ruined our relationship with every single country in the CSTO, and they have their Turkic connection to Azerbaijan, and they have their dictatorial, autocratic connection to each other. So why are we surprised that they're not willing to help us, and they're saying that Aliyev is our buddy? Well, he is, and we know that. We should have known that. So what did we have to gain from ruining our relationship with these countries? I don't know. It's because of this idealistic, naive vision of world affairs where democracies defend each other, come to each other's help. In the meanwhile, Ms. Ursula goes to Baku and declares that Azerbaijan is their reliable partner, and in the middle of embracing and kissing him all over the place. And the United States State Department is saying that we have interest in Azerbaijan. We're not going to allow Iran to destabilize southern Caucasus. So both America and Europe are showing you very clearly where their interests are. They're not with the velvet democracy. They are with Aliyev. So this whole theory of democratic peace and democratic solidarity just went through the toilet, and we became victims of our idealism and our naivete.
Just to sort of belabor this topic a little bit more, you mentioned that the time may come that Russia will be forced to withdraw, and it's unfathomable to me right now what we do in that case. But are there any Western security mechanisms that could be triggered to ensure at least the safety of the Artsakh population? I'm not sure, sort of, there has been some discussion, I believe, as part of this sort of U.S. plan that they have. I think they call it the Sullivan Plan, and as they were negotiating, and there was some talk about international measures, but we don't have much detail. Do you think that there could be some mechanism set up for security, at least of the population of Artsakh?
Well, again, this is not difficult. This is not difficult to find out. What needs to happen is these people who are calling themselves our government should just ask. They should appeal to the Western world, to Europe, to the European Parliament or whatever, leaders of Europe, and to American leaders, and say, well, we are facing ethnic cleansing. There's a real danger of ethnic cleansing. What are you going to do? This question needs to be asked. And to my knowledge, no one has asked this question. And there are when you want to know what a certain government is going to do, just look at what it's saying, at least. That's a starting point. They're not saying that they're going to come here and protect us. No one is saying they're going to guarantee the security of the population of Artsakh, even though they know that there's ethnic cleansing coming. Even Liz Truss said that, the former Prime Minister of Britain. She said that there is a real prospect for genocide. But what is the Western world going to do about it? Another thing that needs to be mentioned is that the West did not allow the Albanian population of Kosovo to be massacred. They stopped ethnic cleansing there, and they were right to do so. And they did the same in Bosnia. Why are we different? Is our blood not red? This question needs to be asked, but they're not asking it because the West has no interest in coming here. And if I'm wrong, I would be delighted to say that.
Yeah, and definitely them purchasing more gas does not sound like it's going in our favor.
No.
All right. So over the past month or so, Pashinyan has been emphasizing that Azerbaijan is preparing to commit genocide in Artsakh. Yet he and his government have been he and his government have been quite vocal. But when it came to the parliament discussions about this issue, the opposition wanted to submit a draft statement. They objected to it, and basically, in order to de-emphasize Artsakh's self-determination rights. The ruling party said that those views were not part of the government's policy, and basically critics argue that the Armenian government is largely acting as an observer in this case. Many times Yerevan has said that Artsakh is not the responsibility of the Russian peacekeepers, etc., etc. And most recently, Armenian authorities have been proposing this idea that Stepanakert and Baku should negotiate directly. How would you evaluate the Armenian response to this thing?
It's a madhouse.
Yeah.
It's a mental clinic. It's a mental clinic. We are victims of incompetence. We're victims of emotional decision-making and constant failures. Everything we try, we fail. There was the era of peace that we declared after this humiliating defeat. That failed. We had the thesis of we're just going to be friends with our neighbors even though they want to kill us. I'm glad that they finally realized that there's a danger of genocide. We knew this. We knew this all along. They are now finally admitting it, while at the same time saying that we're still continuing moving forward with our era of peace. How do you make peace with someone who wants to kill you? As Winston Churchill said, you can't reason with a tiger when you had it in its mouth. Mm-hmm. You can't do that. First, you have to take your head out.
Right.
What did we do to do that? 2 years. What did we do with the army? Only now, a month ago, 2 months ago, we started talking to Iran and India about purchasing some missiles or some kind of weaponry. That's not going to arrive here in months, and it's too late anyway. And it's not going to make any difference if it's just a few things, because we're not talking about a few things. We're talking about a joint army from both sides now that has a 40-to-1 advantage over us in terms of the military budget and potential force, size of the armed forces plus the people they can mobilize. 40-to-1. What did we do? What have we done in 2 years? We're only now starting to realize that there's genocide coming and we need to arm ourselves. We became victims of incompetence and naivete and idealism and people who are performing the duties and functions that are clearly not suited to perform. This is why this happened.
And I know there's no turning the clock back, but starting from today, what could Armenia do that it's not doing? What would you advise an Armenian government, whether it's an Armenian government that cares, let's say that is not naive? Can we attempt to airlift aid there despite the threats from Azerbaijan to shoot us down? Can we withdraw from the peace negotiations? Recognize Artsakh's independence? What tools do we have in our toolbox that we can use?
We have pretty much made every conceivable mistake in the last 2 years, in the last 40 years, and in the years before that as well. It's not just these people. It's also everyone else pretty much has been in power in 30 years. We failed to build a real government, economy, an army, technology, industry, science. We failed at pretty much everything. What can we do now? Very little. We can't fight for ourselves because apparently we don't even have a real army right now. We cannot airlift things there because they'll shoot us down, and they have Turkish technology there on their side helping them. If I'm not mistaken, Turkey has taken a few of its F-16s now to Azerbaijan, so they can deal with that very quickly. We have ruined our diplomacy with the CSTO and with Russia, and Russia is not in a position to fight for us right now. And we have nothing from the West. I mean, if these people were so oriented towards the West, great. They could have created an alternative. There is nothing. There is no alternative. In fact, they allowed the West to openly declare that Azerbaijan is their ally. Right. They did that. Von der Leyen said that, and the State Department said that. At least we could have built some kind of a Western alternative. We're still not doing it. We need a competent government, we need competent leaders, and we need people who understand how diplomacy works. I don't think these guys understand that, because they have ruined and they failed pretty much at everything they could have failed at in the last 4 years.
All right, let's talk a little bit more about the peace deal then. I think all of this is happening in the context of ongoing negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan on peace, and I have to use the air quotes on that. And unfortunately, this process is being exploited by world powers, to their interests. Moscow is taking pot shots at the West, whether it's United States or Europe, and vice versa. And as far as I know, there are at least like 4 different approaches and formats. One is basically directly between Armenia and Azerbaijan, where Azerbaijan effectively seems to be dictating different proposal versions, and there's bilateral communication going on. One mediated by Russia, another one by EU and the US as well. And there's very little reliable information about what's being discussed at what points, and which proposal is basically the predominant. But what happened to the peace process? I mean, it's what are the main points of contention now, and do you still believe, as both sides seem to have expressed in the past, that by the end of the year, which is I guess less than 15 days, there will be a peace deal signed?
It's very difficult, as you mentioned, to understand exactly what's going on, because from people who are in government right now, we only get contradictory information. There's some things being said one day, then it changes the other day, then it's denied the third day. It's very difficult to understand. From what I understand, there was a Russian version of this document and a Western version of the document. In the Russian version, initially there was some mention of future status for this enclave, but then later the Russians withdrew it under Azeri pressure, apparently. And then there was the Western version that didn't even mention the enclave at all. They're only talking about the borders of 1991. Mm-hmm. So going back to the borders between the Soviet republics, and we're not talking about the self-determination for the people of this enclave, and we're not mentioning the Kosovo precedent, we're not doing anything. It just, we're different, we can just be surrendered. So those are the two documents. I couldn't say more than this because again, it's so contradictory. The information is very contradictory. Right now, when we're facing the prospect of genocide and ethnic cleansing in Artsakh, what are we negotiating? It's very difficult to understand, because if they're willing, they have all the cards. How do you negotiate when you have no cards and your opponent has all the cards? What are they negotiating with? I'm not so sure. When you don't have any allies, well, you have some allies, but they're not really engaged now. One of them is very weak, and the other one, the U.S. made a statement saying it will not allow Iran to start meddling in the affairs. So basically, it's a clear pro-Turkish, pro-Azeri position against us, and people still don't understand it. That's what there was one country that was deterring Azerbaijan against invading Armenia. That was Iran, and the U.S. spoke against it. The U.S. State Department said that we will support Turkey and Azerbaijan against Iran. So even that card they took away from us. They took it away from us. We have no cards in this game, and we have people from whom we can't understand anything about this process. What are they going? Even if we surrender this little enclave, the next issue is the corridor. If we give up the corridor, then we give up the southern region of Armenia. After that, we will be in total encirclement, and after that, we'll just have to leave. All of us will have to leave. And there are no answers. I mean, they're only now waking up to the prospect of genocide. When are they actually going to tell us? Are they going to surrender the corridor or not? The Russian officials said that it will not be an extraterritorial corridor. So it will be considered part of Armenian territory. They said that. But they're the only ones, to my knowledge, who said that. If we love the West so much, which, again, I love the West as well, just as well as anybody else, why can't we ask the European government, the French government, the American government to say some very clear things? A, that will not allow genocide in Karabakh, that there will be no genocide in Karabakh, and they will guarantee it, that they will guarantee Armenian sovereignty and Armenia's borders and Armenia's security. It's not difficult. They do it all the time for those countries where they have real interests, like Taiwan, like Israel, like Turkey. There are many other countries with whom they have absolutely no problem clearly stating their interest in Ukraine. Look at Ukraine. There's massive assistance to Ukraine. Look at the Baltic republics. They have their bases there. They have their forces there. It's not difficult. If they wanted to do it, they could. Are they willing to do it for Armenia? If yes, they should state it. If no, then they should not, at least not meddle with other countries that are trying to help us in this situation, like Iran.
So as part of this Russian track, recently Dmitry Peskov, Putin's spokesperson, said that they do not exclude the possibility that there will be a sort of trilateral Russia, Armenia, Azerbaijan meeting in St. Petersburg at the upcoming sort of informal CIS summit. Armenia has not confirmed this, but what could be expected in this summit if it does take place, and if this trilateral meeting does take place?
It's very difficult to say.
Right.
It's very difficult to say. I mean, it's the same process. It's just another meeting. Will Azeris push for no status for Karabakh and the corridor? If they push for it, the Armenia will say no. I hope they say no. And will Russia be able to leverage its position and force Azeris to give up that claim? I'm not so sure. That's what's going to happen. They want to get rid of the of Artsakh Armenians, and they want the corridor. And Act 3, we have no Sunni. That's what they want. I hope that these people will say no to this. Will Russia be able to force them to come to some kind of an agreement? Sadly for us, and that's why it's happening right now, sadly for us, the Russian influence has weakened in our region.
Okay. All right, let's talk about another issue, the UN Security Council. Essentially earlier this week, Foreign Minister Arad Mirzoyan made an address to the UN Security Council, or he called on the UN Security Council to sort of discuss this issue. And the National Security Council Chairman, Armen Grigoryan, he has been going around various EU governments and trying to update them. And we were aware that today there was supposed to be a UN Security Council session, although it was closed doors. What can be expected there? Is there enough solidarity, even let's say within the UN Security Council? As you know, two of the sides at least, or basically this Russia versus West conflict. Do you think that will also interfere in any sort of consensus on this Lachin corridor? I mean, this is a basic humanitarian issue that at least it should be embedded in the core principles of the United Nations. Is there a possibility that they may at least achieve consensus from the humanitarian perspective?
International organizations, especially the United Nations Security Council, they can function when there is an accord, there's an agreement among the great powers. Right now, clearly, there is no such agreement. And whatever Russia says, the West will oppose it, and whatever the West says, Russia will oppose it, in most cases. Look at the precedents. They could not come to an agreement during the war 2 years ago. One of the great powers blocked it. Allegedly, it was Britain, but I don't think there was any confirmation of that.
Right.
They could not come to an agreement then. I don't think there's any reason to believe that they will come to an agreement now, because there's still no. And look at the Minsk group; it doesn't exist anymore. So clearly, the only international kind of circle that united Russia and the West and was supposed to mediate some kind of a peaceful solution here, it's no longer in existence because of these disagreements between Russia and the West. And look at it, they finally, in the end, they said that they will not allow anyone to solve this conflict by force. Well, they did. And they accepted it. And there's no Minsk group anymore.
Yeah.
So for those people who believe in these words, international community, I would urge them to be very, very careful when you say these words, when you make people believe that the international community is going to do anything, while in fact it does not.
Yeah. In fact, the British ambassador to Azerbaijan, he's only one of them, but he has been frequently visiting Shushi, congratulating sort of Azerbaijan. As you say, it seems like there's at least a significant segment of the worldwide community that is accepting the use of force to solve conflicts like this, despite that being an enshrined principle.
Well, it just happened in front of their eyes, didn't it? And they didn't do anything.
Right.
And NATO's chairman, whatever the position is, Stoltenberg, told the Armenians that Turkey is a very valued ally and sent them back home when they were asking for help. This happened 2 years ago. I mean, we can't have that short of a memory, right? We know what happened. So again, this naive belief that the international community is going to come and save us. We have this syndrome of sleeping beauty. When we were little, there's this fairy tale about a princess sleeping somewhere in the tower and a prince coming on a white horse and fighting the dragon to save her. We somehow have this complex. We think that we are the sleeping beauty and the West is going to come and save us. And every time that it doesn't happen, we still keep believing it. It's very interesting how we believe the same fairy tale while we can see that the world doesn't really care, because there are no real interests in our country, but there are real interests in Azerbaijan. Britain has some very real interests in Azerbaijan, and the West has only one interest in this region: to kick Russia out. And we're the only remaining ally to Russia, so they want Russia to withdraw from here. What will happen to us? Look across the border at what happened to what was called Western Armenia, and look at Hadrut. Are they protesting the ethnic cleansing of Hadrut? No. We lost another region. The next region is going to be Mardakert or Stepanakert. They keep doing it. The world limits itself to declarations and expressions of concern, expressing its concern, but nothing gets done. It's not difficult for America or Europe to say that they will not allow ethnic cleansing and they will not allow any aggression against Armenia. It's very easy to do. They have done it for Ukraine. They've done it for the Baltic republics. They've done it for Israel. They've done it for Taiwan. They can do it if they want to. Biden recently said he reversed this policy of strategic ambiguity, the U.S. Policy towards Taiwan, and said, no, we will defend Taiwan if it comes to that. It's not difficult for them to do it if they want to. They don't want to because they don't have any interest in us, sadly.
Yeah, definitely. I think I concur with many of your points, but I'm still going to ask, about this sort of international community issue. A number of government representatives from Artsakh, who were stranded here, as I said, Artsakh Blockade, the former HR ombudsman of Artsakh, and he's currently deputy state minister acting, as well as Yerevan Stepanyan, acting HR ombudsman. We're conducting a sit-in in front of the United Nations. There were also protests across all the sort of major UN Security Council nation embassies and representative missions. In fact, they even demonstrated in front of the Chinese embassy, and China has largely sort of been, neutral and standoff. They have not expressed a strong position on these issues. But just yesterday, I think that one optimistic thing I saw was after the third day of sit-ins, the local Armenia-based UN resident coordinator, Christine Weigand, essentially met with Beglarian and Stepanyan. This seems to be the first time ever, in my opinion, or at least as far as I could recall. And the UN rep has basically, they met them, and it was a quite lengthy meeting. So my question is, our hands are tied, our actions are limited, but what do you think about this kind of activism, and could the Armenian government even support these types of efforts so that at least the international community hears us? It seems like that's one thing that they could do, right? They have full control of the public TV. They could have sort of advertised these protests. There were a large number of people. By large I mean 1,000 people, but not 100,000 people, which I think would make a bigger impact. So why isn't at least the Armenian government using this soft power, at least get these foreign countries to pity us a little bit more? Unfortunately, it seems if that's the only thing that's left.
I think you use the right word, pity. During the genocide in 1915, Armenians were trying to find shelter in foreign embassies in Constantinople, and whoever got in, and the rest of them were butchered. The times have not changed, and we have not changed. 100 years later, the only thing we can rely on is, like you said, the pity of foreign governments. Of course, it'll have some resonance. It will have probably moral resonance, maybe political resonance, but the UN is not going to intervene in this conflict because in the UN Security Council, there will be no agreement between Russia and the other members, and the other members have no interest here other than seeing Turkey and Azerbaijan triumph and getting rid of us so that they have an anti-Russian belt stretching from Istanbul all the way to Central Asia. That's what they want, because potentially that creates a counterweight to Russia on the southern flank. That's what they're going to do. Yes, we can protest. Yes, we can go to the embassies. We can talk to them. They can publish some materials in the media, and all that's going to do is that the world will read it and feel sorry for us for a day or two, and then they'll just move on. We witnessed a whole genocide in Rwanda in 1992, I believe, or 93. Close to 900,000 people were killed, chopped up like lettuce. Literally for over a month, and the world watched it on television and no one did anything. It happened in the 90s. We're not talking early 20th century, we're talking just 30 years ago, and nothing happened. And France only intervened in the end, and allegedly intervened on the wrong side and saved the perpetrators of this genocide. So if we're thinking that the world is going to drop everything and run to save us if Aliyev invades Stepanakert, we're wrong. It's going to be just another genocide like Bosnia.
Arthur, you mentioned something about, for instance, during the war, there was also a UN Security Council meeting, and allegedly Britain blocked it. We know that the UK is invested very strongly in this relationship with Turkey, with Azerbaijan. British Petroleum has many different sort of assets in Azerbaijan. I believe the Azerbaijani government sold rights to the mines that are in Artsakh to the UK. So in that context, yesterday, the head of the British spy agency, Richard Moore, he's the head of the MI6, and he visited Yerevan. And 5 days ago or 4 days ago, Armen Grigoryan, chairman of the National Security Council of Armenia, was also in London, and he met with Richard Moore. What does Armenia want from the UK? And I mean, obviously meeting is great, but I don't recall a time when, actually even this may be the first time that the chairman of the MI6 is in Armenia. What do you think is being talked about?
Isn't he a close friend of Erdogan? According to the media, he's a close friend of a Turkish leader.
And he used to be the ambassador to Turkey, and he's, I think, a Turkish linguist and so forth, so he has a lot of...
So he is, at a minimum, a pro-Turkish representative of a pro-Turkish state that congratulated Azerbaijan on its victory, that sent Prince Charles to Istanbul on the 100th anniversary of the Armenian genocide to add insult to injury, the only major European country that has not recognized the Armenian genocide, and the representative of their secret service is here talking to our leader. Need I say more? I think the strategy would be to give some false promises, using the fact that we have an incompetent and naive group. Give us some hope, some promises, make us reject Russian presence here and an alliance with Russia, and believe Western promises, and then in the end give up this enclave, give up Karabakh, and give up the corridor, and then in the end, of course, succumb to Turkish power, which they are not going to stop.
Thank you, Arthur, very much for your frank opinions and thoughts here. And for our viewers and listeners, I would like to thank you for listening to us, and feel free to share this information through your social media. My name is Hovik Manucharyan. Our guest was Arthur Khachikyan, and this is a collaboration between Groong, Armenian News Network, and 168 AM. For listeners of Groong, feel free to visit 168.am and get this content there and subscribe to their news feeds. And as well, feel free to visit podcast.groong.org to subscribe to our podcast and help spread information in the English language to more people.
Okay, that's the show. Stay in touch. We like to hear from our listeners. If you're not subscribed to our channels, please do so on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and on your favorite podcast platform. On behalf of everyone in the show, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.